Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Health in Your Hands. I'm Dr. David Ajibade with the Brain and Body Foundation. I hope you're staying safe. If you've been vaccinated, good for you. Stay healthy. Don't drop your guard. Remember, this is a fight that everybody is involved in. So please continue to practice the safety principles that have been drummed into you by the NCDC. Now, we're going to be talking about a topic that, in my opinion, is crucial. And as a matter of fact, that's how we started and why we started this program in the first place. If you remember, about 2 years ago, I did an episode called Why Blacks Die First. And we're going to be talking about it a lot more when our guest comes on. But when you're thinking about sports, when you're thinking about the fastest man in the world, the names like Usain Bolt, Michael Johnson, and so on and so forth. But the picture that comes to you is that of a black man. The same thing with long distance running. You hear of the East Africans, those from Ethiopia, from Kenya, who continually smash the records. They dominate in these events. So to some degree, you associate the blackness with physical strength and health. So it's puzzling, in my opinion, when we started seeing, or I started noticing that, and of course, this is not new, everybody pretty much is aware of this, that Black people tend to have much higher rates of certain conditions, especially the chronic diseases. Hypertension, diabetes, cancer, specific kinds of cancer like prostate cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer, even mental health conditions. We're seeing a preponderance of Black people having that problem. Why is that so? I think we need to shine the light on that and really interrogate it and understand it so that we, as healthcare professionals and as government workers and as decision makers, will be able to inform those, the man on the streets, but also more importantly, especially important, are those who don't have access to healthcare, those living in remote areas, the villages or towns where there's no access to a healthcare specialist like the one we're going to have, who's going to come on the show very soon. We need to be able to empower people to make the right decisions and understand their weaknesses, especially as Black people, and then make the necessary corrections, take the necessary precautions to ensure that they and their kids live a long, healthy life. I think we owe that to them, for Pete's sake. So without much further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Susan Edionwe. How are you, ma?
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you for having me. Glad to be back on the show.
Yes, and your last time we had you, there were lots and lots and lots of responses that people liked what you had to say. They liked the way you said it. And so, as you know, I've been trying to get you back on, and finally it has happened. So thank you for making the time.
Thank you.
All right, so let's just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into our topic today.
So I am an ear, nose, and throat physician, or a head and neck surgeon is, I guess, the other name for it, that is in the United States. I am based in Houston, Texas. I am heavily involved in a lot of organizations that deal with all things Nigerian health. So I'm currently the national membership chair of the Association of Nigerian Physicians in the Americas, as well as the chair-elect for the Nigerian Physician Advocacy Group. So Nigerians and their health is something that I care very much about. I'm also a lifestyle medicine physician. So that is a relatively new realm of medicine that is actually one that you can become board certified in and recognized by the ABMS, which is sort of the body that recognizes our different specialties here in the US. So wellness and really looking at health from a holistic standpoint is something that is very near and dear to me. And one of the reasons why I like platforms like this because I like to share the message of people and patients really taking their health in their own hands.
What is your opinion about all this? I know I've thrown out a few things, but I got to tell you, I mean, this because having worked in the U.S. and worked in Nigeria, these differences were more striking to me. But what's your observation from all this in your practice?
In terms of the sort of genetic predisposition for different kinds of diseases, it's what we know. It's definitely something that we, because medicine is a lot of medicine is about trying to create an explanation or understand the patterns that you see in front of you. When you see a demographic of people continually have the same problem, more so than another, natural inclination is that you try and say, well, what's going on here? For those who don't know, in 2003 was when the international effort to complete the human genome sequencing was done. And I actually was in one of the institutions that was a part of that, although my part was very, very small. But I was at the Baylor College of Medicine doing a rotation there and got to actually contribute a very small bit of research to sequencing the human genome. And what really drove that is this question of, well, why is it, how can we explain the differences in diseases based off of ethnicities and groups of people? And it really drove us to say, well, the answer must be in our genes. And from there, after 2003, you really saw this explosion of a lot of research going into, well, what sorts of genetic mutations and genetic inheritances make this person or these people express the diseases that they tend to have versus others. I mean, and it makes sense in this world of medicine where our job is to try and explain to you what's going on. So yeah, it's definitely something that we have and we continue as in medicine as a whole.
Absolutely, and that's what we're talking about. We're going to take a quick break here now, Doc, and we'll be right back. So folks, do not go away. All right, welcome back, folks. Just as a reminder, and I know sometimes we forget to remind people about this, the Brain and Body Foundation, we host free clinics on Fridays. In other words, you can go and find out, you can contact us, come to our clinics. Our staff, even though I'm in the US, our staff is on ground to take care of your kids, those with brain disorders and those with sickle cell disease, free of charge. Yep, I said so, free of charge. So just call in, and then they will give you the instructions. You have our information on the website, I guess it's going to be on your screen, www.brainandbodyfoundation.org. And if you need to speak to me, my staff will arrange that for you as well. So don't forget. All right. Why Blacks die first. One of the things that has stood out the most, in fact, I saw this report, 2015, for the first time ever, the top 5 causes of death. Among the top 5 were heart attacks and strokes. Never before. It was always about infection and diarrhea and all that for West Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But now it's like it's creeping in. And growing up in medical school, we all thought, oh, this heart disease, stroke, that's a problem of the third world countries. That's a problem of the US and Canada and UK. They eat all the hamburgers and on and so forth. But it's affecting Nigeria and the rest of West Africa much, much more now than we possibly ever imagined. It's worse between Blacks and whites. What is going on here?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. The statistics definitely confirm what we're finding. In the United States, for example, statistics show that 48% of Black males and 44% of Black females have some form of cardiovascular disease. And as you mentioned, the World Health Organization has put out statistics showing that in sub-Saharan Africa, the leading cause of death is cardiovascular related. So the numbers are definitely there. Again, there is both sides of that same coin. There definitely is a genetic predisposition. whenever we talk about these things, I always like to preface it by telling people we're very early in our understanding of the genetics that goes on that contributes to the expression of heart disease more so in Black people than in non-Black people throughout the world. We do know that there are some genes so far that are contributors. One of the genes, something called apolipoprotein E, that is a gene for a protein called apolipoprotein that is responsible for fat metabolism and how our body gets rid of fat. As you know, fats, triglycerides, cholesterol, they all play a very, very major role in the development of all kinds of cardiovascular disease. So there is a thought, and this was a study that came out in 2013, that there is a genetic mutation in people of African ancestry for this particular kind of lipid protein. And that may lead to some of the disturbances that we see with Black people being able to metabolize fats appropriately. And that may be a genetic contributor to cardiovascular disease and subsequent death from cardiovascular disease.
Okay, all right. So there's a genetic aspect. I hear that. We can't do much about that. Is there a lifestyle factor involved too?
100%. There is definitely, again, other side of the coin. There's absolutely
specifically where Black people are concerned, because we've got to be able to explain why Black people.
Yeah. There's absolutely a environmental, that's the category, environmental aspect to all of this. And when really sort of thinking this through, this is actually what I'm about to say actually is sort of the underlying issue, not just for heart disease, but for a lot of the comorbidities. A lot of these things are lifestyle diseases. And when you look at lifestyle issues, environmental issues that plague both Black people in America and Nigerians, we see some commonalities. One, sedentary lifestyles. Oftentimes we don't even really think of how our lack of activity plays into heart disease, things like heart disease, even things like sudden death. There's actually a link between sedentary lifestyles and your risk of sudden death. But when you look at heart disease specifically, this is a huge environmental factor. When you look at both demographics, whether it be Black Americans or Black Africans, the studies prove that we suffer both, regardless of what part of the world you're in. We both suffer from inactivity. In fact, there was a study that showed that a quarter of Nigerians die from diseases that are related to lack of physical activity. That's 25%. And in the US, the numbers are no better. The numbers are absolutely no better. With a lot of the different conveniences that we have in life, Americans as a whole suffer from sedentary lifestyles, particularly amongst African Americans.
So it seems to me like it's a cultural thing that has been almost programmed into our genes.
You know what? We are, when I have these conversations with people, the more and more we sort of delve into these things, I often find myself saying, we're more related than we think. We are more alike than we're different. Because especially for Black people, whether you are African or of African descent and African American, there's so much that seems to tie us together, including diet. So we talked about activity, but diet is also a part of it, both in the Western society, but also in Western Africa, Nigeria. We are seeing a Westernization of our diets. We're seeing portions get bigger, and we're seeing diet habits get worse. And that trend, it's a global trend. So, it's not just exclusive to Africa and the US. It's a global trend, but it's a trend that affects Africans as well as African Americans. And it's a huge contributor to heart disease and a lot of the other comorbidities that we talk about today.
Speaking about diet too, I've noticed that whites tend to have more prone to take, they have their own health challenges, obviously, and their dietary problems. But they tend to have a lot more of the raw veggies and fruits on their tables at dinner time and at lunchtime than black people here. Black people tend to like the fried stuff, the cooked stuff, sometimes the spiced stuff. But in terms of really focusing on getting those raw veggies, which, as you know, these raw veggies have the nutrients, the enzymes, the protective factors for the heart, that if they're not cooked, I mean, is when they are raw that they are most potent and most beneficial to the body. And I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see veggies as big a factor in most African and black neighborhoods as well as much as the whites.
Yes, I have a great anecdote for that. Recently in my city, there is a new African grocery store that has an eatery in it, and everything they're serving all fried. Now it's good stuff, right? Who doesn't like meat pie? Who doesn't like Nigerian egg roll? Who doesn't like puff puff? Exactly. Jollof rice with palm oil. Who doesn't like beef, right? it's all the stuff that we just want to eat that. But just going through and when standing there, you don't see a lot of fresh anything on people's plates. It's all the cooked stuff, the fried stuff, the stuff that tastes great. Something that my mom always says. My mom is a bit of a nutritionist in her own right. She has been talking about a lot of, and mind you, my father is actually a dietitian, but my mom was the original nutritionist in our family. But she says something to us, and she still says it to this day. And if you see my mom, she looks decades younger than she should look, and she's a very slender woman. But she says you have to eat to live versus living to eat. There are times when it's okay to indulge, right? No one's saying to deny yourself, but you have to understand that eating is really a part of providing the nutrients to your body. So you have to understand how to eat appropriately to live well, rather than just living to eat anything that you want to eat. And that's something that, it's a struggle that we see in African and African American communities. And we see it in other communities, but particularly in these communities, it's a struggle that is still a challenge.
And I think we tend to be more prone to this problem. We're running out of time, and we're going to take a quick break now. But we still need to just touch on some of the other things that we're now finding out. For instance, dental health and the connection between bad dental hygiene, oral hygiene, and cardiovascular disease. Another thing, we mentioned exercise. Another thing is nutrients like vitamin D, which we blacks globally tend to be lacking in. And I'm always shouting about this. It has come to the front even more now with COVID-19. That was a big factor. A lot of research was being done with COVID-19 and vitamin D. Yes, the argument is that it's more of an association than a causative factor, but it cannot be ignored nevertheless. So these are a few of the other things that I think that should be part of the discussion as we go along. But we'll take a quick break here. Folks, do not go away. All right, welcome back. And I'm here with Dr. Susan Odionwe, who is an ENT surgeon and lifestyle medicine, talking about why Blacks die first with regards to cardiovascular disease. So, Doc, I know we don't have all that much time, but we can't leave this without talking about diabetes, because that's becoming an explosive factor, not just here, but around the world.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you can tell I'm somebody that likes to look at the numbers, but the numbers don't lie. 60% of African Americans, diabetes is 60% more common in African Americans than in white Americans. And then in Nigeria, over 11.2 million people, which is 1 out of 17 adults, 1 every 17 adults suffer with diabetes. So diabetes is definitely something that is a problem for people of African descent, whether you are African or African American. And it's the same thing as what we talked about with the heart disease. There is a genetic predisposition. Now, it's still known as a lifestyle disease. I think we can safely say that even though there is some genetics that factor into this, this is a very lifestyle related disease. There is some evidence, and this is early studies sort of looking at, again, genetic sequencing. There are certain chromosomes where certain mutations have been shown to be more prevalent in people of African descent. But that notwithstanding, what we do know is, like I said, lifestyle, lifestyle, and lifestyle. And a lot of the things that we talked about before definitely play into it, particularly diet and activity. Those two things, if you make a change in those two things alone, those can be curative for your diabetes as long as it's not too far gone. So that is something that for those who are listening, especially if you're listening in Nigeria, that is something that you have the control to cure on your own. It leads me to, if I can, to take a minute to mention something that in the environment, so to speak, that plagues both Africans and African Americans. When we talk about, is it nature versus nurture, and what factors in the environment predispose us to these things? Health literacy is a very big risk factor. And so what do I mean by that? This issue of not understanding what things cause the diseases that we have and what we can do about them, we find that health literacy, that's what we call that, is an issue both for African Americans, but also for Africans. And we see that health literacy is a little different in other communities where they're more proactive about learning about their health and taking their health into their own hands. So for those who are listening, when we talk about diabetes and other diseases, the most important thing you can do for yourself is be proactive and educate yourself on these things.
Absolutely. Well, very well said. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing these shows, and we're going into all this this effort to ensure that people get it, you know. And speaking about lifestyle and diet, that's a general term, Doc. And I know we don't have all that much time to really go into it, but there's some quick tips you can give us. Like, should we be eating pounded yam every day, every 3 times a day, for instance? I mean, what are the things that we're looking at here?
So in this lifestyle, this sort of curriculum of lifestyle medicine, there are certain things that lifestyle medicine looks at. And it really looks at, one, your diet, your exercise level, your sleeping, because people do not even recognize that your sleep or lack thereof can predispose you to certain diseases. It looks at your relationships, toxic relationships, and it's kind of, this alludes to something we talked about before. Stress isn't just feelings. Toxic relationships aren't just feelings. They actually have a physical component that can contribute to your health. And then it looks at your history of risky substance use. So are you a smoker? Are you a drinker? These vices aren't just innocent. There are physical issues that can come along with that. So in the world of lifestyle medicine, the kind of diet that we recommend is a whole food, plant-based diet. So what that really looks like is something we talked about earlier: more vegetables, more green leafy vegetables. Some people like to describe it as the rainbow diet. So you want to eat all the colorful things that you see in nature. Does it mean you can't eat meat? No, it doesn't mean that you can't, but you want to switch around the portions of what you're eating. You want your meat and fish and dairy, all those things, to be less than 20 to 30% of your diet. And you want the larger bulk of your diet to be these uncooked, raw sorts of things that we find in nature. Genetically, what unites us, whether you are in Africa or in the US and you're Black, genetically, this unites us. And yes. So particularly for vitamin D, that pigmentation, the gene for pigmentation, the melanin that we have, that is what can hinder our ability to synthesize vitamin D from sun exposure. I found a very interesting statistic that showed that half of African Americans are vitamin D deficient. And we have seen that low vitamin levels plays into certain diseases, such as uterine fibroids. So yes, I want to stress what you've said. Vitamin D and supplements, do not overlook these things, because we are at a disadvantage. Our skin is beautiful, but there are some things that come along with having such great skin.
Absolutely. Even though they say black don't crack, deep down under,
You know?
So, Doc, thank you so much. And of course, we're not going to let you go. You're going to come back next week, right? And we're going to complete this topic because we still have to talk about cancer, sickle cell disease, and the like. We have to educate our Black people about these conditions so that they're not careless. And we have a tendency to be careless anyway. So but as we give you more information, people will be more apt to make those right decisions and take the right actions. Very good. Folks, remember, we've already treated why Blacks die first, and I mentioned about 7 things, many of them which have been talked about today, but you can go back to our website, brainandbodyfoundation.org, and you can watch some of those shows. You can watch that particular show, and the one Dr. Susan Edionwe did before, which was fantastic. She did something on stress and heart disease and other conditions as well. So we have to go now. Remember to stay safe. And Dr. Susan Edionwe, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
You bet. Bye, folks. Take care. Bye.
And never get this kind of